I loved the teaching. I'd killed myself. I was just killing myself. So that's why I left in the fall of 1972. And I cashed in my savings and bought this farm on the top of a hill. I had a girlfriend then. I had separated from my wife. And we brought it back at the little farm, subsistence farm. And it was in that I was redoing the roof. And I remembered, I didn't have anything I cashed in my savings to pay for that time, to pay for the, whatever it was, insurance, new shingles, whatever. But that was not sustainable. So I had to find something that was going on. And I had bought, when I was teaching, I had bought a book on blacksmithing. And I remembered it. My wife needed an anvil to bend armatures. She was studying, I don't know if she was my wife then or not, but she was studying early childhood education.
Is this Rusty?
No, this was my next wife. So I bought her, I found an anvil up in Pownell, and with it came a little River's forge. And I wanted the anvil, but so she could bend armatures to make big sculptural animals and so on. And it was one day I remembered that book that had stored it away, and I took the book out and I started a fire with a little River's forge and hard coal that was left over in the basement. And well, you have the first tool I made, that rake, because what's his name in the book said I needed to have fire tools, and so I made the rake and the poker.
What was that book?
Alex Beeler, The Edge of the Anvil. Not The Edge of the Anvil.
Art of Blacksmithing?
The Art of Blacksmithing, yeah.
You went full-time in the fall of 72.
Yeah, I switched my emphasis. I mean, we were building back the farm, so we were building gardens, we were tapping maple trees, we were collecting firewood, we were building planting an orchard. So we were doing. It wasn't like
you and Rusty.
You, me, and
your second wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, and then we found this farm. And we bought it by writing on the back of an envelope. We promised, we exchanged $10, and we both parties signed their names literally on the back of a brown paper bag to consummate the sale. And then we went to the bank with it. So
it seems like it's a pretty big deal to leave, your family.
Yeah, it was a very big deal.
What was, you mentioned stress. What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, I'm not sure that much was going through my mind. I mean, I knew I had to get out of the situation. I'm embarrassed to say that I really deserted my daughter. I left her with Rusty on the campus of the school we were teaching at. I just have to flat out say I deserted my daughter. And I made it, I don't know if could ever make that up, but I've certainly made my peace with my daughter, and we're, if not close, we're at least over that hump, and we stay in pretty close touch. I'm embarrassed by it. I'm appalled by it. That I would do that. But when there's no excuse, but the excuse is that I was drowning and I went to save myself like any animal will. So the farm was going back to my childhood, and to restore, I went back to my roots.
Did this create problems for you?
Sure. Yeah. Created problems because I had to, um, pay for the divorce, which I did willingly. I just gave over half my worldly assets to my ex-wife. Then my daughter came to live with us. So we had two girls on the farm. And gradually, milking the cow, feeding the chickens, planting the trees, worked in the garden. Um, I got myself back together. I restored myself. Um,
So you started blacksmithing
I started blacksmithing, yeah,
on the farm.
on the farm.
And I was going to ask, how many shops have you had?
The first one was in an old chicken house,
Okay.
and the main carrying beam had broken at one end, so the roof started up here and then down to the ground. Where I put my portable forge, there was a hole in the roof, so the smoke went right straight up, and that lasted until the first winter snowstorm in January. I took it down the rest of the way, so I moved into the milk room, where the ceiling was here. And by the time I left, the smoke ring was here on the wall because it didn't have a very good exhaust. So, so my first three forges that were there, I built my first forge on the farm um, with uh, using the issues of the Blacksmith Journal, which was a publication in the 1890s or something like that. Yeah.
I think most people know of you from the plains.
Yes.
What were the shops that kind of led up to that?
Well, I had three there, and when I moved down here, I put the front doorstep, which was a beautiful stone, on a stone boat, and with my little tractor, drove it into the U-Haul, uh, put the steel underneath it. The last day, the swage block that you have, somebody came and said, you could probably use this. So that came, somebody gave it to me, and I drove a truck down with a cat
to Virginia.
To Virginia. We drove down to Madison, Virginia. We bought a little piece of land.
What year was this?
72.
72.
It was on July 3rd, 1972. And on 4th of July, 1974, I did my first show in Little Washington when they used to have a street fair. So I built the forge. We lived in the back of the truck while a house was being built, and I was building the forge, and then we moved into the forge until the house was finished. So that was my next forge.
Where was this forge?
It was on what was the road? It was in Madison. Oh, the Upper Ruth Road. Where am I going? You want and the next? So then, when Ann and I separated, I built Ann's pottery studio for her, and she was a good potter and a better. She was really a watercolorist.
And Ann is
the next wife.
Your second.
Yeah. Then we came to a parting of the ways. We were trying to be self-sufficient by our work. And, of course, as you know, there are not many blacksmiths. So when somebody finds a blacksmith, it's sort of, woo! And, it's easier to find work as a blacksmith than it is as a potter. It seems as though, at least when we moved here, it seemed like if you threw a rock, you'll hit a potter, whereas you have to go through 6 counties to find a blacksmith. So she wanted me not to work as hard at blacksmithing, but to help her in pottery. So I would go schlep her clay around in 50-pound boxes and so on. And finally, that was untenable. So we separated. Um, I moved my forge into a barn, the overhang of where they used to lift the hay up into the track. Yeah. The most exciting thing that happened there were black snakes being driven out of the barn, falling out into my slack tub from the smoke. Thing. Um, so that was, I'm not quite sure when.
That was in Madison.
That was in, yeah, Madison. Um, I moved to uh, Flint Hill and built a house, and I worked out of a garage for a while. And then a man who owned a lot of the plains saw me and offered to build me a shop if I would move to the plains because he wanted to make it a little center. And I accepted. He built the shop, and so I worked in the plains from I don't know exactly when, but until 2020, roughly 20 years in the plains.
2020 or 2000?
Good to, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, from 1980 until 2000, and at 2000, living here. So I drove every day to the plains, and then I was able to buy 2 acres along the road from my neighbor, so I had enough room to build the shop. So I built the shop there, moved in 2020, and yeah, man. So I think it's 7 shops.
So before you were at the Plains, you were making a living.
Oh yeah, I was making a living, not a very big living, but I was making a living in New England.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right when you started.
Not quite from the start. The first year I made $2,000, and I thought it was hot stuff. But it got better after that. It's never been, well, we can go into the technicalities of that later on.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the time in the Plains. That was 1980.
Right.
And you said that someone contacted you
Yeah.
and asked you to move there.
Right.
Because that was kind of the center part of town. It's a good property.
Yeah, it was a good property. Right in the center of town. It became too good a property, and it was so accessible to people who wanted to buy. And I had these big railway express doors, big barn doors, and I would always have them open in good weather. And families would walk by, and I'd say, "Oh, it's a blacksmith," and they would think it was like um, where down the Rockefeller plantation. So they would come in and they want to be entertained. Well, you never know who's coming in because they're interested in what. So you stop and you talk and schmooze and let the kids turn the crank, and then you're ending up making a leaf for somebody, but it means you're not not working on the whatever it is you're meant to be working on. So that's when I started looking for a different place where I could not be disturbed, more or less. So it meant they had to find me.
You became kind of a part of the community.
Oh, I certainly did. Yeah. I mean, people would come in. I was giving free advice and counseling and entertaining kids, half the kids in town would come by, and I kept drawers, a couple drawers with tools for them, with copper and little hammers, and for them to come in and bang on. Wow. Actually, Claudia was working with me in that shop, and uh, yeah, it was a good time. It was a nice town to be in, and very friendly, very supportive. Um, and if somebody comes in and needs to talk to you, really your responsibility is to put the hammer down and talk. So at least that's what I took upon myself.
It seems like a big deal that first day when you were moved in to the Plains. What was it like when you got everything in the first week, the first day when you first set foot in that shop? What were you thinking?
Well, I can remember being scared undertaking a new shop, uh, which had an option to buy. That, could I produce enough uh, things to sell to take on this debt? Because heretofore, I'd never taken on. I believed in the old New England adage that unless you can afford to pay for it right then and there, you don't take it on. And I did not want to get uh, in debt. I don't believe in deficit financing. I'm not a good businessman in that way. Um, my brother-in-law had a foundry up in New York State, a very good foundry, and it was bought by I don't know, a holding company or bank or something or other. It's for $19 million. And I said, how can you live with that debt over your head? And he said, at $19 million, it's not my problem. It's their problem. Well, that kind of thinking, I don't have that kind of thinking. I didn't believe in it. So for the, until I knew whether it was going to go, I was scared and I worked very hard.
You mentioned Claudia.
Yeah.
It's your third wife.
Right.
How did that come about?
We met on a trip, a visitation with, we were going to Bill's, Uncle Bill's.
Yes, sir.
Kitchener, thank you. And we were from the guild. There was me, Faye Lecomte, another guy, and Claudia. We were all members of the guild, and we just decided one weekend we're going to go see Bill. And actually, it started. I think we were going to the Yellen Shop Museum up in Philadelphia, and so somehow it all got. We did that, and then we ended up at Bill's shop down in Delaware. And it got to be hilarious because we got lost in Delaware at night. And Faye had this big old station wagon, and he put the seats down in the back and filled it with mattresses. We're driving all over Delaware at night, lost, trying to get home. But anyway, Claudia and I hit it off, and I was not hitting it off with my wife, and vice versa. And anyway, so we got together. And she worked for the government. She had been married to a diplomat, and that didn't work out for her. And so she got 2 weeks vacation, and she went to Penland. I'm not sure what school she went to, but she took blacksmithing, and she loved it. And that spatula over the stove she made and gave to her.
Can I grab that?
Yeah. And so, yeah, she gave that to me, and I use it all the time. It's got a nice weight. It's nice. The slips under. It's not flexible, like you can buy. But it's just great. And it's got some oomph, so you don't have to worry about bending it. And it has a nice little brass inlay. It's a beautiful piece. Very traditional. So when, she came back, she was living in DC. She said, well, I'm tired of working for the HE, whatever it was. So, let's get together. So we worked, in the forge for, I don't know, a couple of years together. And then, she did not like doing commission work. And commission work's scary, you take it on and, you're worried about, will the client like it, or is this going to go in the scrap pile, or are they going to, anyway. So she set up her own forge here in town. But we worked together for about a year. And then her children were out in California. She was California born. And eventually she wanted to go back out there with them. And I did not want to go to California. And, how was I going to go to California? All the equipment I had. So I don't know how that goes on. But anyway, I ended up working alone there.
What was it like working with your new wife?
It worked well. I mean, we got along. We got along fine until we didn't. And then it wasn't really that we clashed in the forge in the shop. It was just that she wanted different things in blacksmithing, and then eventually she wanted different things in living. So
is she still blacksmithing?
I have no idea. She's the one of my wives that I have never been back in touch with. I've tried to be with all of them, and I needed to apologize to them, and I need to try to not restore the relationship, because that wasn't, but at least to apologize for my part in what made it go sour or not supportive anymore. I hated to leave that. I hate to leave that kind of relationship sort of, in abeyance. It's not complete. And if a lot of people don't want to make that effort to end it creditably, and I didn't either at the time, but I came to understand that to carry it's a festering wound, and if you don't take care of it, somehow it continues to fester. So, swallow my pride and try to make good on it in some way, to finish it with a style, or if not style, at least peace. There's enough hate in the world, or disagreements, and anything you can do to ameliorate that, apologize for your part in it, I think is good for the society, good for you, good for your soul. Anyway, so she's out in Oregon, and I don't know any more than that. So at one point she was working there, and I had somebody else working in the forge too. And then, I wasn't a good manager. Um, um, I wasn't efficient enough, I guess. So eventually ended up working with, I hired an apprentice, and he worked with me for 6 years. And then that ended.
Is he still blacksmith?
It still is, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, he's done some work at the cathedral.
Really?
Yeah.
What sort of, at the Plains, what sort of jobs were typical for you?
There was a lot of decorative housework. Could be a combination of hinges, latches, hooks, handles, for cabinets. And then it got to be railings, balconies, handrails, a lot of handrails, gates, finally. I've got gates from Richmond north to Rhode Island. Um, um, so I started getting in these bigger commissions from architects, and then I got to be able to design the work for the architects. So the work got to be pretty heavy, and that's when I had to the overhead cranes, install them to move it, because physically I couldn't do it. And
Was there a job in your memory that was the first big job, not necessarily the cathedral, but
yeah,
one that felt big to you to take on?
the gates always felt big.
Mm-hmm.
They had to span 13 or 14 feet. They stay level. So,
What was the first one that really sticks out in your mind?
well, the Rockefeller Gate, but I've done several other dates, and I've designed a lot more that I didn't get to do. But that was the phase in the 70s and 80s, and then, of course, into the 90s, where I taught myself how to draw, architectural drawing. I taught myself the engineering that was needed for those creations, and then how to sell it to a client,
Mm-hmm.
how to try to make money on it.
The Rockefeller Gate was 91.
91.
So what was at the Plains? You started in 80. What was the first sort of big commission piece?
The big leaves and the down, 10 miles from here.
The brass leaves.
Yeah. What is it called? It'll come to me. Mm-hmm. And then I did something that was not a gate. It was a wall piece in West Virginia. It was 8 feet by, I don't know, 12 feet wide. That was a job. The installation almost killed me. I did a huge stairway and balcony for an estate in Rhode Island. I got it all the way up and it was 3 inches short, missing. So that was exciting.
Were you fearful of taking some of these big jobs on?
Did I fear?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, you always fear. I mean, I always fear. Yeah. The first big job I took was a curved stairway. So you've got at every increment, you've got 3 curves going on at once. You've got up, you've got round, and I don't know what the other one is, but it's
pitch.
Yeah, the lift. So yeah, you go to bed worrying about it, you wake up worrying about it, you pray a lot.
What gave you the confidence to kind of push forward through these?
Well, I think it was the same thing that allowed me to jump from teaching to blacksmithing. That growing up on the farm, there was always something that needed fixing. How could I best do the fixing? How could I learn from that? So it was the integration of my mind my brain with analyzing the problem and then how to get from A to C without tripping on B. And I don't know how you get that. I think you get it by problem solving and gaining confidence in you as an individual. I don't mean that it's out there and you say, oh, well, now I can do this. But gradually, I mean, that was for me the excitement, not conscious, but unconsciously developed of moving from a sedentary lifestyle, which Boston would have been if I grown up, to living in the country where you have to have certain skills to live in the country. I mean, if you're going to be a farmer, you've got to learn how to farm, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, somehow that seeps into you. I didn't know anything about teaching, but I knew what good teaching could be. And so that's how education teaches you how to educate yourself. And so you educate yourself. I mean, I've been called I don't know how to pronounce it, didact, where you
autodidact.
Yeah, well, you teach yourself, and I'm always have done that. No, obviously I haven't always done it, but I learned to do it, and so you have this confidence in yourself. You know, this has been done before. Curved stairways have been done. There are certain things you have to learn. Erasers are still on pencils, so you can rip it out and start over again. And that's what's wonderful about iron. It doesn't look right. Take it out and put something else in there. And what you need is the ability to step back and see what has to be done. Okay, what's the next step? You can do this now. You have to talk firmly to yourself and have another drink and then leap. It's like when you were a kid and you held your nose and you left off the edge of the quarry into the water. You knew you were going to be okay, but it's a long way down. And yeah, it's scary. Does that?
Thinking about the planes still.
Right.
If you could, would you do anything differently during the planes period?
Well, I've never been a mechanic, so I don't really know about tools. And I mean, I know, okay, you get one that goes like that, but it would have been, it would have been nice to have more space so I could get more tooling to let me do things that were in my head. For a long time, I had I don't know what it's called, but it's a hammer, pneumatic hammer, but it has a 4-foot throat. So you can work in the middle of a sheet of steel or copper or something or other.
English wheel?
Well, it's not quite an English wheel, but it's a takeoff on that. Yeah. English wheel doesn't have the,
Okay.
Yeah. English wheel is more curving the metal.
This was like reciprocating.
This was just a up and down,
okay.
Boom, boom, boom. Had a stroke of about that much. All the big leaves that I did for the place in North Carolina were done under that. Tippled them, turved them, and it had a lot of different attachments, so you could.
What gauge sheet metal was that?
Probably 12, maybe 14. Something that had substance and would take it, but could be manipulated. So I lusted after a big air hammer for years, but I found one, but it took 13 feet of space, and then self-contained Baudry, or not a Baudry, what's the other big one? And anyway, and then I had a 500-pound Baudry. I did all the cathedral work under that. And so if I could have had a bigger shop, it would have been nice. I would have splurged more.